Okay, let's talk about something that has been absolutely rocking the markets. We're talking about the insane surge in the price of silver. On January 26th, 2026, silver, the metal you think of for, I don't know, old coins and your grandma's silverware, it did something that nobody saw coming. It blew past a historic milestone. Suddenly, it wasn't just shiny anymore, it was shocking. I mean, just look at this number. Plus 273% year over year. To give you some perspective, a great year for the S&P 500 might be 20, maybe 30%. This is on a completely different planet. A jump this big isn't just a market trend, it's a seismic shift. It tells you the entire story of an asset has been completely torn up and rewritten from scratch.
So what on earth is going on here? And that really brings us to the core question, the big mystery we're going to unpack in this explainer. Is this whole thing just another crazy speculative bubble, a temporary mania that's just destined to pop? Or are we actually looking at a permanent breakout, a fundamental, irreversible change in what silver is actually worth? To figure that out, we've got to pop the hood and see what's really driving this engine.
Right, so to understand the price, you first have to get this one simple thing. Silver has a brand new job description for the 21st century. It's not just a pretty thing to stash away for a rainy day anymore. No way. It has a new gig that is so critical, it's literally powering our future. This slide really tells the whole story, doesn't it? On the left, you've got the silver of the past. Think jewelry, old coins, fancy forks. It's beautiful, it's valuable, sure, but it's kind of passive. But on the right, that's the silver of right now. It's the invisible, absolutely essential hero inside every piece of technology that defines our modern world. From the solar panels on our roofs to the AI data centers that are changing everything. And this chart right here, this is the proof. A whopping 60% of all silver that gets used today is for industrial demand. Now, that changes the entire game. It's like if we suddenly found out that flour wasn't just for baking bread, but it was also the only material we could use to build spaceships. The whole value proposition would just flip on its head, right? Silver is no longer just a precious metal. It's a critical, strategic, industrial commodity, first and foremost.
So let's break down the 3 technological revolutions that are just gobbling up all this silver. Think of them as the unstoppable engines of our future: green energy, electric vehicles, and AI. Solar panels absolutely need silver for its conductivity. Nothing else works as well. EVs use almost twice as much silver as a regular gas-powered car for all their complex wiring. And the AI explosion? That requires tons of it for the high-performance chips in those massive data centers. And remember, these aren't some tiny niche markets. These are the biggest growth stories on the planet right now.
Okay, so demand is absolutely exploding. The obvious question then is, well, why don't we just dig more of it up, right? Seems simple enough. But it turns out the answer is anything but simple. This is where the supply side of the story gets really, really interesting and reveals this huge structural problem. And here's the concept you absolutely have to understand: the byproduct trap. You can see here about 70 to 80% of all silver that's mined only comes out of the ground because a mining company was actually looking for something else, usually copper, lead, or zinc. Let's make that real for a second. Imagine you run a giant copper mine. Silver is just a nice little bonus you get on the side. Now, if the price of silver triples, are you going to spend billions of dollars to open a whole new copper mine just for that little bonus? Of course not. Your decision is based on the price of copper. And that, right there, is the trap. The supply of silver literally can't respond to its own price signals. And when you look at the data, the story gets even tighter. The world's top producers, they're all hitting a wall. Mexico, the biggest player, is stuck with political issues and red tape. And look at Peru. They're dealing with declining ore grades. That's just a fancy way of saying they have to dig up way more rock to get the same tiny amount of silver, which costs a fortune. All the while, China's hoarding its supply for itself, and Russia's production is tangled up in sanctions. The bottom line, there's no cavalry coming over the hill with a bunch of new silver. And then there's this. This is a huge strategic move. China, which refines a massive chunk of the world's silver, has just decided to put its hand right on the spigot. By making companies get export licenses, they can now turn the flow of refined silver on or off to the rest of the world whenever they want. They're treating it less like a commodity and more like a strategic weapon in a global tech race. And what's the result of this demand boom hitting a supply wall? A mind-boggling deficit. In 2025, the world needed 230 million more ounces of silver than every mine on the planet could possibly produce,
We're not talking about a small gap here. This is a gaping chasm. And for years, it's been quietly draining the world's stockpiles, just waiting for a collision. And that collision brings us to the main event. This is the moment where the whole story becomes a heavyweight title fight. In one corner, you've got the paper markets, where traders in New York and London bet on the price. And in the other corner, you have the physical markets, where real companies and real people are trying to buy real solid metal. This is the moment where the entire system just broke. What you're looking at on this slide are two totally different worlds living on the same planet. It's bizarre. On the left, in the paper markets, you had financial speculators who were actually selling silver, betting that the price would go down. But on the right, in physical markets like Shanghai, the demand from factories and investors for actual hold-it-in-your-hand metal was completely overwhelming. You had two markets moving in totally opposite directions. Something had to give.
And this number right here, is the smoking gun, a premium of over $14 an ounce. That's how much extra money buyers in Shanghai were willing to cough up, on top of the official paper price, just to get their hands on the real metal. A premium that huge isn't just a market signal, it's a scream. It's the physical world looking at the paper price and yelling, that price isn't real.
And don't just take my word for it. This quote from a Saxo Bank report nails it. They're saying flat out that this surge to $100 had nothing to do with Wall Street playing games. It was driven by powerful, real-world, unstoppable demand from factories that have to have silver to build their products and everyday people who wanted the security of holding the actual metal. It was, in short, a revolt of the physical world against the paper one.
So you have a demand revolution, a supply crisis, and a market that just completely disconnected from reality, all colliding at once to create this absolutely historic moment. But the biggest question of all is, okay, what happens now? Where do we go from here? And to figure that out, we have to look at the huge debate that's raging right now between two camps of experts.
Okay, so on one side, you have what's called the super cycle argument. These folks believe that the supply deficit is the new normal, that the huge demand from tech is here to stay, and that silver has just been fundamentally revalued as a strategic asset. They say there's no going back. But on the other side, you have the overbought camp. They argue that, look, no price goes straight up forever, and that these crazy high prices will eventually force companies to find cheaper alternatives. They think the huge premiums were just a sign of temporary panic, not a true permanent global shortage. And that leaves all of us with this final, massive question. Because whether the price settles at $50 or $150, one thing has become crystal clear. Our entire technological future is now deeply, profoundly dependent on this one single metal. This situation has morphed from a simple market into a global chessboard, with nations and corporations as the players, all fighting for control over a critical resource. The race for silver isn't just about money anymore. It's about power. And it's going to shape the 21st century in ways we're only just beginning to wrap our heads around.